Okay, now we're going to talk about the framing systems, which is the skeleton of the building. And when we're talking about framing, we're talking about what's providing the skeleton or what's actually holding up the structure. We're dealing with gravity, which is vertical loads, so the weight of the building pushing down, plus sideways loads, which could come from wind or impact or weather or any other thing that could come from the side. And we're talking about stability, keeping the building holding its proper shape. If we're talking about a low-rise building like our library that's 3 stories or less, we can have wood or light steel. And if we're talking about bigger buildings, we're going to have with heavier loads and larger spaces. For common commercial framing, cast-in-place concrete, steel, load-bearing walls, and then some kind of hybrid system. We're going to look at each one of these. Cast in place, we already talked about this with walls. This is where we actually put the walls and the floors and the beams in place, and we pour the concrete in place. This is a concrete pump truck, which is pumping the concrete up here so that they can put it into place there. Here we have concrete columns and concrete slabs. The floors are called the slabs. And this is actually where we're putting it right in place. Our library has structural steel, where we actually have steel columns, steel frames, steel girders underneath each of the floors. You can see it here on this building, steel trusses underneath, steel beams, steel columns, all steel for our structure. We can also have our load-bearing walls, which could be any of the ones we've talked about, masonry, tilt-up, precast concrete, and then our floors and roofs could be any of these here as well, framing, steel, wood. This is a close-up of the trusses we're looking at, and here if we're talking about load-bearing walls, we could have a CMU wall, so there's our concrete blocks, and then with wood framing here underneath the floors. And then we can have hybrid systems. Here, for instance, this over here is a cast-in-place concrete, and then for our interiors they have steel beams. So a hybrid system just has 2 or 3 different kinds all in one building. Really, when we're talking about what kind of wall system and framing system we're looking at, we're really interested in what the cost of it is, because we want to build our building where it's safe, but as cost effective as possible. We want to have lower materials. The lighter weight our materials are, the lower the cost. So, for example, steel or wood is a lot lighter weight than concrete. And we talk about efficiency. And we've talked about efficiency before in other classes, but here we're talking about efficiency where we're talking about how much does the whole design weigh divided by how much it can hold.